My name is Matthew, and at 34 I have built a life most people dream of as a successful software engineer in Boston. Growing up as the middle child, I was never the favorite, just the awkward kid my family tolerated. 7 years ago, during Thanksgiving dinner, my mother actually asked me to leave the table while my siblings laughed at my humiliation. Now they are desperately trying to reconnect, but only because they need something from me. Before I tell you how I taught them a lesson they will never forget, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to family who did not appreciate you. I grew up in what looked like a typical middle-class family in a quiet Minneapolis suburb. Our house was nothing special. A 2-story colonial with a basketball hoop in the driveway that my brother Jason used constantly while I watched from my bedroom window. My family consisted of my stern father Richard, who worked as a small business owner selling insurance, my controlling mother Karen, who micromanaged our lives while maintaining her image as the perfect suburban mom, my older brother Jason, who was 3 years my senior, and my younger sister Amanda, 2 years behind me. From the beginning, the family dynamics were crystal clear. Jason was the golden child, the athletic star who collected trophies in football, basketball, and baseball. Every weekend, my parents drove him to tournaments across the state, their faces beaming with pride. Amanda was the princess, cute, popular, and charming in ways I could never master. She had my mother wrapped around her finger with her ballet recitals and social butterfly personality. And then there was me, the middle child, fascinated by computers and technology, in an era when these interests were considered purely nerdy and antisocial. While Jason brought home sports medals and Amanda brought home friends, I brought home perfect report cards and computer programs I had written. My father would glance at my straight, as give a distracted nod and ask, "Why not join a team sport instead of sitting inside all day?" Our family traditions reinforced my outsider status. Summers meant camping trips where Jason would lead hikes, while I struggled to keep up earning eye rolls from my father. Family game nights featured competitive sports trivia, where I could never contribute. Holiday gatherings became showcases for my siblings' talents, while I sat quietly in the corner, already learning my place in the family hierarchy. I remember my 10th birthday with painful clarity. I had been dropping hints for weeks about a new computer game I wanted. The day arrived and my parents seemed distracted. At dinner there was no cake, no presents. When I finally asked, my mother's eyes widened. "Oh, Matthew, was that today? I am so sorry, but we have been so busy preparing for Jason's regional hockey tournament tomorrow. They promised to celebrate the following weekend, but it never happened." That night I cried silently in my room, while listening to them pack Jason's gear, their voices excited about the upcoming competition. As I moved through middle school and high school, I tried desperately to gain their approval through academic achievements. I joined the math team and computer club, winning state competitions, and even getting featured in the local newspaper for a program I developed that helped the school library catalog their books more efficiently. My mother hung the article on the refrigerator for exactly 3 days, until it was replaced by a photo of Amanda at her dance recital. I developed a coping mechanism that would define my youth, retreating into my tech projects and the online communities where people actually valued my contributions. In my bedroom, surrounded by computer parts and code books, I found a sanctuary where I could excel without judgment. The internet became my real home, where strangers praised abilities my family dismissed. There were countless incidents that reinforced my role as the family afterthought. When I was 14, I spent weeks preparing for a science fair where my computer program won first place. That evening, my mother attended Amanda's chorus concert instead of my award ceremony. When I showed her the blue ribbon later that night, she said, "That is nice, Matthew, but did you have to wear that wrinkled shirt? You know how I feel about first impressions." The pattern continued throughout high school. My parents attended every one of Jason's football games, but made it to exactly 2 of my academic competitions over 4 years. They blamed work schedules, other commitments, or simply forgot. Meanwhile, they rearranged their entire calendar around Amanda's social calendar and Jason's sports requirements. Somehow, I also became the family scapegoat. If something went missing, I was accused first. If a decision turned out poorly, I should have spoken up sooner. If a family gathering felt awkward, my antisocial attitude was to blame. Once when Jason broke my mother's favorite vase while tossing a football indoors, something he had been told repeatedly not to do, she still found a way to blame me for distracting him by walking through the room. The one bright spot in my childhood was my grandfather, my father's dad. A retired electrical engineer, he recognized my passion for technology and encouraged it wholeheartedly. During summer visits to his house, he would work with me on small electronic projects, teaching me to solder circuits and explaining how different components work together. "You have a gift, Matthew," he would tell me. "Someday that brilliant mind of yours will take you places your family cannot even imagine." When I was 16, my grandfather passed away suddenly from a heart attack. At the funeral, I stood apart from my family, my grief, a private thing they could not understand. I had lost the one person who truly saw me. That night, as relatives gathered at our house, I overheard my mother telling her sister Matthew, hardly shed a tear at the funeral. He always was the unemotional one. She had no idea that I had been crying for hours alone in my room, clutching the multimeter my grandfather had given me for my birthday that year, the only birthday gift anyone had remembered. By the time I graduated high school, I had secured a scholarship to study computer science at a prestigious university in California. My parents seemed relieved that I would be going so far away, though they framed it as concern. "Are you sure you will be okay so far from home?" my mother asked, though she had encouraged both Jason and Amanda to apply to colleges within driving distance. The subtext was clear: I was the child they worried about, least the one they could afford to have at a distance. I left for college with a mixture of relief and lingering hope that perhaps distance would make my family appreciate me more. That hope would eventually lead me back home for the Thanksgiving dinner that would change everything. By my senior year of college, I had almost completely adjusted to life away from my family. I had found my place among fellow computer science students who respected my abilities and shared my interests. The constant need for parental approval had faded, somewhat replaced by genuine friendships and academic success. That November, I received incredible news. After a grueling series of interviews, I had been offered a prestigious internship at one of the top tech companies in the country, a position that typically led to full-time employment with a six-figure starting salary. It was the opportunity of a lifetime validation of all the hours I had spent coding while my brother played sports and my sister socialized. I decided to share the news in person during Thanksgiving break rather than over the phone. Perhaps naively, I thought this achievement might finally earn me the recognition I had sought for years. I flew back to Minneapolis with a lightness in my step I had not felt in years around my family. Our house was exactly as I remembered it. Jason's sports trophies prominently displayed in the living room, Amanda's dance photos covering an entire wall, and my academic awards nowhere to be seen. My mother greeted me with her usual distracted hug, immediately asking if I could help set up the dining room for the extended family that would be joining us. Thanksgiving dinner was always an elaborate affair in our household. My mother spent days preparing, viewing the meal as a reflection of her worth as a homemaker. This year, 15 people squeezed around our dining table. My immediate family, both sets of grandparents, minus my paternal grandfather, whose absence I still felt acutely, my mother's sister, and her husband, and 3 cousins around my family age. I helped with preparations all morning, waiting for the right moment to share my news. Every time I tried to speak with my parents, they were too busy, my father watching football with Jason, my mother directing kitchen operations with Amanda as her loyal assistant. Even then, I noticed how they included my siblings in meaningful ways, while assigning me menial tasks like setting out napkins and filling water glasses. Finally, we gathered around the table. My father carved the turkey while my mother beamed at her perfect family tableau. The conversation flowed around me, my aunt asking Amanda about her sociology classes at the state university, my uncle discussing the football season with Jason, and my father. I waited patiently for a natural opening. Just as I was about to speak up during a brief lull, my mother turned to Jason with a broad smile. "Jason, did you not say you had some exciting news to share with everyone?" Jason straightened up his chest, puffing slightly. "Yeah, actually. Coach called yesterday. I have been offered a full football scholarship for my master's program. They want me to stay on as assistant coach while I study sports management." The table erupted in congratulations. My father clapped Jason on the back so hard it would have sent me sprawling. "That is, my boy, Always knew you would go far." My mother actually dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "We are so proud of you, honey. This calls for a toast." She raised her glass, and everyone followed suit, including me, though the familiar weight of invisibility was settling back onto my shoulders. After several minutes of discussion about Jason's bright future, questions about the program, and reminiscing about his athletic achievements, the conversation finally shifted to my cousin's new job. I saw my opportunity and cleared my throat. "I actually have some news too," I said, trying to match Jason's confident tone. "I have been offered an internship at Quantum Tech for after graduation. It is really competitive. They only take 5 students nationwide each year." There was a moment of silence, and I felt a flicker of hope. My father frowned slightly. "Quantum, what? Is that one of those startup companies?" "No, Dad. It is one of the largest tech companies in the world. Their internship program is famous in the industry. Most interns get hired permanently with starting salaries around $100,000. My mother tilted her head. $100,000 for playing with computers all day. That seems excessive, does it not? The dismissal in her tone was unmistakable. I felt heat rising to my face but tried to maintain my composure. I would not be playing mom. I would be developing software that millions of people use every day. My aunt, perhaps sensing the tension, attempted to help. "That sounds impressive, Matthew. Is this what you have been studying for?" Before I could answer, Jason snorted. "Matt has always been glued to a screen. At least now he might make some money from it." Several people chuckled, and Amanda added, "Remember when he tried to explain coding to Grandma last Christmas? She thought he was speaking a foreign language." More laughter rippled around the table. I felt my opportunity slipping away. "It is actually a really big deal," I insisted, my voice rising slightly. "The recruiter said my algorithm design was the best they had seen from an undergraduate." My mother's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Matthew, there is no need to raise your voice. We are all very happy for you, but there is no need to try to overshadow your brother's achievement." "Overshadow?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I am just sharing my news just like Jason did." The difference, my mother said with that tight smile I had come to dread, is that Jason waited to be asked. He did not try to make the conversation about himself. I looked around the table, searching for an ally, but found only uncomfortable expressions, or worse, subtle agreement with my mother. So I should have waited to be asked. When has anyone ever asked about my accomplishments? The table fell silent. My father shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My mother's smile disappeared entirely. "Matthew, that is enough," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You are being dramatic and making everyone uncomfortable. I am just asking for the same respect and interest that Jason and Amanda get automatically," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. My mother set her fork down with a deliberate motion that somehow echoed through the silent dining room. "I think," she said slowly, "that you should take some time to cool off. Perhaps you should leave the table until you can behave appropriately." I stared at her in disbelief. "You are asking me to leave? I am 22 years old, not a child." "Then stop acting like one," she snapped. "Go to your room until you can be pleasant company." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my father, who studied his plate intently. I looked at my grandparents, who seemed deeply uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. And then I heard a snicker from Jason, quickly followed by a poorly disguised giggle from Amanda. The humiliation burned through me like acid. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Enjoy your dinner," I managed to say before walking out of the dining room with as much dignity as I could muster. As I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, I heard the conversation resume behind me, as if nothing had happened. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, laughter was already floating up from the dining room. In my old bedroom, surrounded by the few remnants of my childhood that my mother had not packed away, academic certificates that never made it to the walls downstairs, science fair ribbons stuffed in a desk drawer, I sat on the edge of the bed, too shocked to even cry. I could hear the muffled sounds of the continued Thanksgiving celebration below. Nobody came to check on me. Nobody brought me a plate of food. I sat alone for nearly an hour before hunger drove me back downstairs. The dining room had been cleared, dishes done, leftovers packed away. My family had moved to the living room for dessert and coffee. As I entered the kitchen looking for food, I overheard their conversation from the adjacent room. "Cannot imagine sitting at a desk all day staring at a screen," Jason was saying. "I would go crazy." "Well, it suits Matthew," my mother replied. "He has always preferred computers to people." "Remember when Dad tried to teach him to throw a football?" Amanda added, followed by laughter. "He closed his eyes every time." I quietly made myself a sandwich from leftovers and returned to my room, the weight of their words heavier than any hunger. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed listening to the comfortable sounds of my family continuing their evening without me, I made a decision that would alter the course of our relationship forever. After graduation, I would create as much distance as possible between myself and the people who had never seen my worth. The next morning I left before anyone else was awake, taking an earlier flight back to California. I left a brief note saying I had changed my flight for study purposes. It was the beginning of my new life, one where I would no longer seek approval from those unwilling to give it. 6 months after the Thanksgiving dinner incident, I graduated with highest honors in computer science. My parents and siblings attended the ceremony, maintaining the appearance of a proud, supportive family. They smiled for photos and made appropriate comments about my achievement, but there was an undeniable distance between us, a chasm that had been growing for years, but had become unbridgeable that Thanksgiving night. I accepted the internship at Quantum Tech and moved to Boston immediately after graduation. The physical distance, over 1,000 miles, was a relief. The move marked not just a geographical separation, but an emotional one. I was determined to build a life where my worth was not determined by family validation. The early days in Boston were challenging. The internship was demanding, pushing me to my limits technically and mentally. I worked 14-hour days, fueled by a mixture of ambition and the lingering need to prove myself. My studio apartment was barely furnished, just a mattress on the floor, a desk for my computer, and a single chair. I poured everything into my work, using the pain of rejection as fuel. During those first few years, my contact with my family became increasingly superficial. Monthly phone calls with my mother consisted of her talking about Jason's coaching career or Amanda's social life, with perfunctory questions about my work that revealed she had no real interest or understanding of what I did. My father rarely came to the phone, sending his regards through my mother. My siblings reached out only when they needed something: Jason asking for help with his fantasy football website, Amanda wanting assistance with her college papers, or later advice on buying a laptop. Neither ever asked about my life or career unless it directly benefited them. Every holiday, my mother would call to express disappointment that I would not be coming home. "Family should be together," she would say, though they had made me feel anything but part of the family. I made excuses about work demands or travel costs, but the truth was, I could not bear to return to a house where I felt like an unwelcome guest. Meanwhile, my career began to flourish. After the internship, Quantum Tech offered me a full-time position as a software engineer, with a salary that exceeded even my expectations. Within 2 years, I had developed a security protocol that became standard across the company's platforms, earning me my first industry recognition. By my 28th birthday, I had been promoted to senior engineer, leading a team of developers on a project that would eventually generate millions in revenue. The same year, I filed a patent for an innovative encryption algorithm that caught the attention of the tech community. An industry magazine featured me in their Under 30 issue, highlighting my contributions to cybersecurity. The irony was not lost on me that as my professional reputation grew, my family remained largely unaware of my success. I never volunteered information about my accomplishments during our infrequent conversations, and they rarely asked specific questions. In their minds, I was still just Matthew who played with computers. While my career soared, I channeled some of my energy into a side project, a startup focused on educational technology that would make coding accessible to disadvantaged students. Working nights and weekends with 2 like-minded colleagues, we developed a platform that attracted attention from venture capitalists. 3 years after inception, we secured $3 million in funding. As my financial success grew, so did my personal support network. The colleagues who had become friends understood me in ways my family never had, appreciating my technical mind, my dry sense of humor, my dedication to excellence. We celebrated achievements together, supported each other through challenges, and created the kind of bonds I had always craved. I formed particularly close friendships with David, a brilliant UI designer who shared my passion for educational technology, and Rachel, a marketing executive whose warmth and emotional intelligence helped me navigate social situations that had always been challenging for me. Together with a few others, they became my chosen family, people who valued me for exactly who I was. My personal life was not without complications, however. I briefly dated Melissa, a talented graphic designer who worked with our startup. For 6 months, things were promising. She was intelligent, creative, and seemed to understand my dedication to work. But as we grew closer, my inability to fully trust and open up became an insurmountable obstacle. When she ended things, her words cut deep. "It is like there is a part of you that is locked away, Matthew. I cannot be with someone who will not let me in completely." Her observation led me to therapy, where I began the slow, painful process of addressing the family trauma that had shaped me. Dr. Harrison helped me understand that my drive for success was partially fueled by a desire to prove my worth to people who might never recognize it. "What would success look like," he asked in one session, "if it was not about proving anything to anyone?" That question changed my perspective. I began to pursue achievements for my own satisfaction rather than as a form of validation. I allowed myself to enjoy the fruits of my labor, moving from my sparse apartment to a waterfront condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. I bought comfortable furniture, invested in art that spoke to me, created a home that reflected who I had become. By my 32nd birthday, both my career and startup had reached new heights. The educational platform had been implemented in over 200 schools nationwide, and I had been promoted to principal engineer at Quantum Tech. My financial situation was secure enough that I could have retired early if I had wanted to, though work remained my passion. I also discovered a new purpose that brought unexpected fulfillment, mentoring young programmers from backgrounds similar to mine. I established a scholarship program at a local community college and volunteered weekends at a coding camp for high school students. Watching these young people discover their potential reminded me of my grandfather and how his belief in me had been a lifeline during my childhood. Through all these years of growth and success, one thing remained constant. My family had no real knowledge of the life I had built. They knew I worked in computers in Boston and seemed to be doing well, but had no concept of the extent of my professional achievements or financial success, and I preferred it that way. The distance I had created was a form of protection, a boundary that kept me safe from their judgment and dismissal. Little did I know that this carefully maintained separation was about to collapse, bringing my past and present into direct, unavoidable collision. It was a Tuesday evening in October, nearly 8 years after the Thanksgiving dinner incident, when my phone rang with a Minnesota area code I recognized immediately. Seeing Amanda's name on the caller ID was surprising. My sister typically communicated through occasional text messages rather than calls. "Matthew, hey, it is Amanda. How are you?" Her voice had that forced, casual tone that immediately put me on alert. "I am fine, Amanda. This is unexpected." "Is everything okay?" I replied, setting aside the work documents I had been reviewing. "Oh yeah, everything is." She paused. "Well, actually, no. Things have been better, to be honest." What followed was several minutes of awkward small-talk questions about Boston's weather, comments about how long it had been since we had properly spoken, observations about how quickly time passes. I waited patiently, knowing from experience that this preamble served a purpose. Amanda was working up to something. Finally, after exhausting her repertoire of pleasantries, she sighed. "Look, Matt, I am calling because there is a situation with the family. A financial situation." "What kind of financial situation?" I asked, though I had already guessed the direction of this conversation. "Dad's insurance business has been struggling for years. The big companies have been taking all his clients. He tried to diversify into financial planning, but it went badly. He made some investments that—" Her voice cracked slightly. "They are facing bankruptcy, Matt. They might lose the house." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. And that is not all she went on. Jason had that knee injury last year that ended his coaching career. The medical bills have been piling up and the school let him go. He has been unemployed for months. I knew about Jason's injury only because my mother had mentioned it during our last Christmas call, though the details she shared had been minimal. And Amanda's voice became smaller. I got divorced last year. Tom left me with the kids and moved to Seattle with his new girlfriend. I have been struggling as a single mom. I had to move back in with mom and dad temporarily, but now with their situation. The picture became clearer with each detail. My successful but distant brother was now unemployed and in debt. My socially adept sister was a struggling single mother, and my parents, who had built their identity around their comfortable middle-class stability, were facing financial ruin. I am sorry to hear all this, I said, meaning it despite our complicated history. It sounds like everyone is going through a difficult time. Yeah, it has been rough. Amanda agreed, her voice brightening slightly now that the worst had been revealed. So we were thinking. The family was discussing options, and we remembered that you have been doing really well with your computer job in Boston. There it was the real purpose of the call. We were hoping, and I know this is a lot to ask, but maybe you could help out with just a small loan, just to get everyone back on their feet. Dad needs about $50,000 to save the business, and Jason has medical bills around $40,000, and I have been struggling with childcare costs while I look for a better job. I did the mental calculation. They were asking for at least $100,000, likely more. For me, it was an amount I could easily afford. But the circumstances left a bitter taste in my mouth. How did you know I could help with that amount? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. A pause. Well, we know you work for that big tech company and those places pay really well, right? And we saw some article about you online when we Googled your name. Something about a startup. It seemed like you were doing really well. So they had researched me enough to discover my financial situation, but not enough to actually understand my life or accomplishments. They had not called in 8 years to ask how I was doing, but they had Googled me when they needed money. I see, I said. And when was the last time any of you called just to check on me, Amanda? Not to ask for tech help or money, but just to see how your brother was doing. The silence on the other end was telling. Matthew, I know we have not been the best at staying in touch, she finally said, defensiveness creeping into her tone. But you moved so far away, and you always seemed so busy. I have been busy, I acknowledged, building a life and career without much family support. Another uncomfortable silence followed. Look, Amanda said, her voice taking on the placating tone she had always used to get her way. Maybe we could discuss this in person. Mom was thinking we could have a family dinner this weekend. You could fly in, we could all catch up properly, and discuss how to move forward together, as a family. The irony of another family dinner was not lost on me. A family dinner, I repeated. Like the Thanksgiving where Mom asked me to leave the table, and you and Jason laughed. Matt, that was years ago, Amanda protested. Are you still hung up on that? We were all younger then, and it was just a misunderstanding. I took a deep breath, considering my options. Part of me wanted to refuse outright to tell Amanda that they had made their choice years ago when they decided I was not worth their time or respect. But another part, perhaps the part still seeking resolution, saw an opportunity. Do Mom and Dad know you are calling me about this? I asked. It was actually Mom's idea, Amanda admitted. She said you have always been the responsible one with money, and that you would want to help family in need. 8 years of minimal contact, and suddenly I was the responsible one when it benefited them. I will think about it, I said finally. The dinner, I mean. I will let you know by tomorrow if I can make it. After ending the call, I sat in my living room overlooking the Boston skyline, turning the conversation over in my mind. The timing was revealing. Not a call when I was featured in industry magazines, not a call when my startup secured funding, not a call on many birthdays and holidays. But financial trouble struck, and suddenly I was worth contacting. I called Dr. Harrison, my therapist, and scheduled an emergency session for the following morning. I needed perspective from someone who understood the complexity of my family dynamics before making a decision. What do you hope to achieve? "If you go," Dr. Harrison asked during our session after I had explained the situation. "I am not sure," I admitted. Closure, a chance to finally be seen for who I have become, or maybe just the satisfaction of them knowing what they missed out on by dismissing me all these years. "Those sound like reasons rooted in old wounds," he observed gently. "What about reasons focused on your present and future well-being?" His question made me pause. What did I want from this encounter beyond settling old scores? "Maybe clarity," I said finally. "A chance to establish honest boundaries, to help them in a way that does not enable the same toxic patterns." Dr. Harrison nodded. "That sounds like a healthier approach. Remember, Matthew, this is not about revenge or even justice. It is about you deciding what kind of relationship you want moving forward, if any." By the time I left his office, I had made my decision. I would go to Minneapolis that weekend, not with the intention of rescuing my family financially, but with a plan to address the real issues that money could not solve. I called Amanda back and agreed to the dinner, booking a flight for Friday evening. Then I began preparing not just financially but emotionally and strategically for a confrontation 8 years in the making. The flight to Minneapolis gave me 5 hours to reflect on what I was about to do. I had spent the days since Amanda's call consulting with my financial advisor about the most prudent ways to potentially help my family without creating unhealthy dependencies. I had also prepared myself mentally for what would undoubtedly be an emotionally charged encounter. Landing at the Minneapolis airport felt like stepping back in time. The familiar skyline, the distinct Midwestern atmosphere, it all brought back memories both comforting and painful. I rented a car rather than asking my family to pick me up, wanting to maintain control over my coming and going. Driving through my old neighborhood was surreal. Little had changed externally, yet everything felt different through the lens of who I had become. I pulled up to my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock, the agreed time for dinner. From the outside, the house looked shabbier than I remembered, the paint peeling in places, the yard less meticulously maintained than during my childhood. Small signs of the financial strain Amanda had described. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering my resolve before walking to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my mother, her hair now streaked with gray, but her posture still rigid with the same controlling energy I remembered. "Matthew," she exclaimed, with exaggerated warmth, pulling me into a hug that felt performative rather than genuine. "Look at you, so professional in your nice suit. Boston must be treating you well." My father appeared behind her, looking older and more tired than I had anticipated. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were wary, as if unsure how to interact with the son who had become a virtual stranger. "Good to see you, son," he said simply. Inside, the house was largely unchanged. The same furniture, the same family photos chronicling Jason's athletic achievements and Amanda's social milestones. I noticed with a pang that the few photos, including me, were from childhood. None reflected my adult life or accomplishments. Jason was sitting in the living room, his injured leg propped on an ottoman. He had gained weight since I last saw him, his former athletic build softened by inactivity. His greeting was overly hearty, a backslapping hug that seemed designed to establish the same dominance he had always asserted in our relationship. "The tech genius returns," he boomed. "Man, you look like one of those Silicon Valley types now. Guess all that computer stuff paid off, huh?" Amanda emerged from the kitchen with a young boy about 5 years old trailing behind her, my nephew, whom I had only seen in the occasional photos she posted online. She looked more like our mother than I remembered, her face showing the strain of recent difficulties despite her attempt at a bright smile. "Matt, this is Tyler," she said, nudging the shy boy forward. "Tyler, this is your Uncle Matthew from Boston." The boy gave a hesitant wave, clearly having no real concept of who I was, an uncle who had never been present in his life. Dinner was a strange performance of normalcy. My mother had prepared all my supposed favorite dishes, though she had mixed up several of my preferences with Jason's, a telling detail that spoke volumes. Around the dining table, the same one where the Thanksgiving incident had occurred, the conversation was artificially upbeat, everyone avoiding the obvious reason for my visit. "Matthew, tell us about Boston," my mother prompted, as she served what she incorrectly remembered as my favorite dessert. "Your apartment must be lovely." "It is actually a condo," I corrected. "On the waterfront." Waterfront, my father exclaimed. Must be doing very well for yourself then. I have been fortunate, I replied neutrally. My work has been well received. And what exactly do you do again? Jason asked, though his tone suggested limited actual interest. Something with computer security, right? I am a principal engineer at Quantum Tech, specializing in encryption and security protocols, I explained. I also co-founded an educational technology company that provides coding education to underserved schools. My mother's eyebrows rose slightly. My goodness, that sounds important. You always were clever with technical things. The conversation continued in this vein. Surface-level interest in my life, exaggerated compliments about my success, careful avoidance of any meaningful topics. I noticed they asked no specific questions about my work accomplishments, friends, or personal life. Their interest extended only to the aspects of my life that might benefit them. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I found myself sitting in the same position I'd occupied during holidays, growing up slightly removed from the central family grouping on the periphery both physically, conversationally. Finally, my father cleared his throat, signaling the transition to the real purpose of the gathering. Matthew, I am sure Amanda has filled you in on some of the challenges our family has been facing. I nodded but said nothing, waiting. Your mother and I, he continued, looking uncomfortable, we have worked hard all our lives. Never thought we would end up in this position. The business has been struggling for years, but we kept thinking things would turn around. My mother jumped in. We have remortgaged the house twice already. The bank will not extend any more credit. We are 3 months behind on payments. Jason leaned forward, wincing slightly as he shifted his injured leg. And my medical situation wiped out my savings. Insurance covered some, but I still owe over $40,000. Plus, I cannot work in coaching anymore with this knee. I am looking at having to completely start over career-wise at 37. Amanda added her part, describing her divorce, childcare costs, and the struggle to find employment that would cover her expenses. Tyler has some special educational needs too, she explained, glancing at her son who was playing quietly in the corner. The assessment and therapy costs are overwhelming. They laid out their financial situation in detail, a combined need of approximately $150,000 to clear debts, save the house, and provide a cushion for fresh starts. We know it is a lot, my mother said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone I remembered from childhood. But family helps family, and you have done so well for yourself. Jason added with a chuckle that did not quite mask his resentment. Yeah, little brother, finally being useful to the family, right? Amanda shot him a warning look before turning to me with a practiced smile. We figured it would not even be much money for someone like you, considering your position and that startup thing you mentioned. My mother nodded in agreement. Family is family, Matthew. We have always been there for each other. That last statement, so blatantly contrary to my experience, was the catalyst that broke my measured silence. Have we? I asked quietly. Been there for each other, I mean. The room fell silent. My mother's smile faltered slightly. Of course we have, she insisted. We are a close family. Are we? I continued, keeping my voice calm and even. When was the last time any of you called just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed tech support or money, but because you cared about my life. My father shifted uncomfortably. Jason rolled his eyes. Amanda looked down at her hands. Matthew, my mother said with a hint of warning, if this is about that Thanksgiving dinner years ago. It is not just about one dinner, I interrupted. Though being humiliated and asked to leave the table for sharing good news was certainly a defining moment. You were being disruptive, my mother defended. And that was what, 7-8 years ago? Are you still hung up on that? I am not hung up on it, I clarified. I am pointing out that it was a symptom of a pattern that has defined our family dynamic my entire life. A pattern where Jason and Amanda received automatic support, interest, and validation while I received criticism, dismissal, and indifference. Jason scoffed. Here we go with the middle child syndrome. Poor Matthew, so neglected. Jason, my father warned, surprising me by actually intervening. I turned to my brother. When I was going through college, did you ever once call to ask how I was doing? When I got my first job, Did you congratulate me? When my startup was featured in Tech Innovator magazine, did you notice? Jason had no response. Amanda, I continued, in the past 5 years you have texted me 17 times. 15 were asking for tech help with your computer or phone. 2 were Christmas greetings sent to the entire family. Not once did you ask about my life. We have all been busy, she protested weakly. And Mom, Dad, I said, turning to my parents, did you know I filed a patent 3 years ago that I created a scholarship program for disadvantaged students, that I was named one of the top 30 technologists under 30 in the country did? You know, I bought a waterfront condo, or that my startup received $3 million in venture funding. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. We knew you were doing well, my father started. You knew nothing about me, I stated flatly, because you never asked. I was the child you never had to worry about, which became the child you never thought about at all. That is not fair, my mother, said her voice hardening. We have always loved all our children equally. Love is not just a feeling, Mom. It is actions. It is interest. It is attention and support and celebration of successes. By those measures, the love in this family has never been equal. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. My father looked thoughtful, my mother defensive, Jason annoyed, and Amanda on the verge of tears. So you are not going to help us, Jason finally said. You came all this way just to throw a pity party about your childhood. I did not say that, I replied calmly. I came prepared with options. But I wanted to address the real issues first, because throwing money at the situation without addressing the underlying patterns would solve nothing. My mother's expression changed instantly, hope, replacing defensiveness. Options. What kind of options? It was time to present what I had spent the week preparing. The moment of truth had arrived. I reached for my briefcase and removed a folder containing several documents. The room fell silent as I placed it on the coffee table between us. I have given this situation a lot of thought. I began, my voice steady and professional, and I have come prepared with 2 options for your consideration. I opened the folder and removed a check, $150,000 made out to my father. I placed it on the table where everyone could see it. My mother gasped audibly. Amanda's eyes widened. Jason leaned forward, a smile spreading across his face. Option 1, I said, gesturing to the check. The full amount you need to clear your debts, save the house, and provide some cushion for fresh starts. My father reached for the check, but I gently placed my hand over it. There are conditions. Conditions, my mother repeated, her tone immediately suspicious. I nodded. 4 specific conditions, actually. I removed another document from the folder. First, I would need a written apology from each of you, acknowledging the patterns of favoritism and dismissal I have experienced throughout my life. Jason scoffed, but I continued undeterred. Second, our family would commit to 1 year of monthly family therapy sessions to address these dysfunctional patterns. I would cover the cost of these sessions. My mother's expression hardened. Therapy. That seems rather dramatic, Matthew. Third, I continued regular family contact that is not centered around money or what I can do for you. Monthly video calls where we genuinely check in with each other's lives. And fourth, my father asked, his voice quieter than the others. Fourth, we would volunteer together at a community center in Minneapolis that helps disadvantaged youth once a month for 1 year. It would give us structured time to rebuild relationships while helping others. The room fell silent as they absorbed these conditions. So basically you want to control us, Jason said finally. Hold your money over our heads and make us jump through hoops. That is not, I began, but my mother cut me off. I have to agree with Jason, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. These conditions seem designed to humiliate us and establish your control over the family. After all these years away, you come back and think you can dictate terms to us. The conditions are not about control, I explained calmly. They are about addressing the root causes of our family dysfunction so that any financial help actually leads to healing rather than enabling unhealthy patterns. They are ridiculous, Jason insisted. Therapy, written, apologies. What are we, children? Amanda, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Matt, if you really loved us, you would just help without all these strings attached." I had anticipated this reaction. Without responding directly to their objections, I removed another set of documents from my folder. As I said, I came with two options. The second option does not involve a direct cash payment. I laid out three separate documents. Instead of giving you money directly, I would provide targeted assistance. For Jason, I would pay for career counseling and retraining in sports management or physical therapy fields where your experience would still be valuable despite your injury. Jason frowned but did not immediately object. For Amanda, I would establish an education fund for Tyler to cover his special needs and future college expenses. I would also connect you with a friend's HR department in Boston, where they are looking for someone with your sociology background. Amanda looked surprised at the thoughtfulness of this approach. And for you, Dad, I continued, turning to my father. I would hire a business consultant to help you either revitalize your insurance business or transition to a more sustainable model. The consultant would work with you for 1 year to implement changes. And what about the house? My mother asked immediately. None of that addresses the immediate problem of the mortgage payments. I would cover 6 months of mortgage payments, I replied. Enough time for these other solutions to begin taking effect. The goal would be to help you all become self-sufficient rather than temporarily bailing you out. My father nodded slowly, seeming to consider this option more seriously than the first. But my mother's expression had grown increasingly rigid. So either we submit to your psychological evaluation and control, or we accept your help on your terms without addressing our immediate needs, she summarized with biting sarcasm. How generous of you, Matthew. Karen, my father, said softly, a warning in his tone. No, Richard, she snapped. I will not sit here and be lectured by my own son about how to run our family. He disappeared for years, and now he returns with his money and his conditions like some kind of savior. I disappeared, I repeated, maintaining my composure despite her escalating anger. Mom, I was the one who was pushed away. I was the one who was told I did not belong at the family table. That was one incident, she insisted. You chose to hold a grudge instead of moving past it. It was not just one incident, I countered. It was a lifetime of incidents. That dinner was simply the breaking point. Jason stood up, suddenly wincing as he put weight on his bad leg. This is bullshit. You come back after all these years just to lord your success over us when we are down. If you wanted to help, you would just write the check without all this psychological crap. I am trying to help in a way that actually addresses the real problems, I explained. Money alone will not fix what is broken in our family. We do not need fixing, my mother exclaimed. We need financial assistance from a son who clearly has more than enough to help without making it into some kind of power play. The conversation was deteriorating exactly as I had feared it might. Amanda sat silently, looking conflicted. Jason continued to stand, his posture aggressive despite his injury. My mother's face was flushed with anger. Only my father seemed to be genuinely considering what I had said. You owe us, Matthew, my mother said, finally, her voice low and intense. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head, paid for your education. The least you could do is help your family without all these conditions and judgments. That statement, you owe us, crystallized everything wrong with their perspective. In their view, parental love and basic care were transactional, creating a debt I was now obligated to repay. Love is not transactional, I said quietly. Parents choose to have children. Children do not choose to be born. Providing basic care and education is the minimum responsibility of parenthood, not something that creates a lifelong debt. How dare you? My mother began, but to everyone's surprise, my father interrupted her. He is right, Karen. The room fell silent. My father rarely contradicted my mother, especially in front of others. Richard, what are you saying? She demanded. My father sighed deeply suddenly, looking every one of his 65 years. I am saying Matthew is right. About all of it. We did favor Jason and Amanda. We did dismiss his interests and accomplishments. We did fail to show him the same support and interest we showed the others. My mother stared at him in disbelief. You cannot be serious. I am, he said firmly, and looking back, I am ashamed of it, especially that Thanksgiving dinner. I sat there and said nothing while you humiliated our son in front of the entire family. I have regretted my silence ever since." His admission hit me with unexpected force. After years of therapy and self-reflection, I had come to terms with my family's treatment, but I had never expected any of them, especially my father, to acknowledge it so directly. "Dad, you cannot let him manipulate you like this," Jason protested. "It is not manipulation to speak the truth," my father replied, his voice gaining strength. "And the truth is, we have not been fair to Matthew, not as a child, not as a young adult, and not now expecting him to rescue us financially, while never having shown genuine interest in his life." A tense silence fell over the room. My mother's expression was a mixture of shock and betrayal. Jason looked disgusted. Amanda seemed uncertain, her eyes moving between our parents. I closed my folder and stood up. I did not come here to create more division. I came with genuine options to help, but I cannot pretend that throwing money at the situation without addressing the underlying issues would be healthy for any of us. I placed the folder on the coffee table. Both options remain available. The check and the conditions for option 1 are detailed inside, as are the specifics of the targeted assistance in option 2. Take some time to discuss it as a family. I moved toward the door, then paused. "The decision is yours. Call me when you decide." With that, I left my childhood home, the weight of years of unspoken truths finally lifted from my shoulders. Whether they accepted either of my offers or not, I had finally said what needed to be said. I had stood in my truth, and offered help on terms that respected my worth, something I had never been able to do as a child or young adult. As I drove back to my hotel, I felt neither triumph nor despair, just a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing regardless of what came next. A week passed with no word from my family. I had returned to Boston the day after our confrontation, leaving the ball firmly in their court. While I went about my daily routines, meetings at quantum tech development sessions for my educational platform, mentoring sessions with young programmers, my thoughts often drifted back to Minneapolis and the stunned faces of my family as I walked out the door. I had expected immediate rejection of my offers. The fact that they had not immediately called to refuse gave me a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, my words had made an impact, particularly my father's surprising acknowledgement of their treatment of me. On the 8th day after my visit, my phone rang with my father's number, not my mother's, which was significant in itself. "Matthew," he said when I answered, his voice sounding older and more tentative than I remembered. "I was wondering if I could come see you in Boston. Just me. There are things I need to say that should be said in person." His request surprised me. My father had never traveled to visit me in all my years away from Minneapolis. "Of course, Dad. When were you thinking of coming? I could fly out tomorrow if that works for you. Just for the day." We made arrangements, and the following evening I met my father at my condo. The look on his face, as he took in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, the tasteful modern furniture, the obvious signs of success, told me he was truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time, as the accomplished adult I had become, rather than the overlooked middle child he had dismissed. "This is quite a place," he said, accepting the coffee I offered him. "You have done well for yourself, Matthew. Better than I ever imagined." "Thank you," I replied, simply gesturing for him to take a seat in the living area. He sat down heavily, placing his coffee on the table untouched. "I have been doing a lot of thinking since your visit, a lot of remembering too, things I had conveniently forgotten or never let myself see clearly." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I want to apologize," he said, looking directly at me. "Not because of the money or because of any conditions, but because it is long overdue. I failed you as a father in many ways. I let your mother's favoritism of Jason and Amanda go unchallenged. I dismissed your interests because they were different from mine. I never gave you the same attention or support I gave your siblings." His directness was unexpected. In our family, emotions and failings were typically glossed over rather than confronted head-on. "The truth is," he continued, "I did not understand you. Jason was easy for me. Sports competition, physical achievements, those were things I understood. And Amanda was your mother's domain. But your mind works in ways mine never could. Your interests in technology, your quiet intelligence, I did not know how to connect with those things, so I took the easier path of focusing on your siblings. That must have been difficult to realize, I said, genuinely moved by his self-awareness. Not as difficult as it must have been to grow up feeling invisible in your own family, he replied. That Thanksgiving dinner. I have replayed it in my mind 1,000 times. I should have spoken up. I should have defended you. The shame of my silence has stayed with me all these years. We talked for hours. My father shared perspectives on my childhood I had never heard before, his own insecurities about connecting with a son whose intellect intimidated him, the dynamics of his relationship with my mother that had led to his passivity, his private pride in my achievements that he had never adequately expressed. So what happens now? I asked eventually. Have you discussed my offers with the family? He nodded. That is the other reason I came. After much debate, and I will not pretend it was easy or unanimous, we have decided to accept your second option. I was genuinely surprised. I had expected them to eventually accept the cash with conditions or more likely to reject both offers out of pride. Mom agreed to this, I asked skeptically. Not initially, he admitted. But after I took a hard stand for perhaps the first time in our marriage, she began to see that your approach offers more than just financial relief. It offers a path to genuine independence and self-sufficiency. Over the following months, my relationship with my family began a slow, sometimes painful transformation. My father embraced the business consultation, working diligently with the advisor I connected him with to restructure his insurance business, with a focus on specialized markets the big companies were neglecting. Within 6 months, the business was showing signs of stability. My mother was the most resistant to change. She attended the occasional family video call, but remained defensive and quick to change the subject whenever deeper emotional topics arose. Still, there were small moments of progress. A question about my current projects, a comment on a photo I shared of my Boston neighborhood. Baby steps, but movement nonetheless. Jason initially refused the career counseling, his pride, making it difficult to accept help from his younger brother. But as his financial situation worsened and job prospects remained bleak, he finally relented. The career counselor helped him leverage his sports background and coaching experience into a physical education program developer role at a charter school, a position that accommodated his physical limitations while utilizing his knowledge. Our relationship remained strained, but there was a new undercurrent of grudging respect. During one video call, after describing a successful program he had implemented, he awkwardly added, "Your idea about the career counseling. It was a good call. Better than just giving me money would have been." Amanda was the quickest to adapt. The education fund I established for Tyler gave her immediate peace of mind about his future, and the job lead in Boston eventually resulted in an interview and offer. She decided to remain in Minneapolis to stay close to our parents, but the opportunity boosted her confidence and led to a better position locally. She began to reach out more frequently, and not just for technical assistance. "I never realized how much I relied on you to fix things, without ever seeing you as a person with your own life," she admitted during one conversation. "I am trying to do better." A year after my confrontation with the family, the situation had evolved considerably. My parents' house was secure, the business was stable if not thriving. Jason had found a new career path, and Amanda was supporting herself and Tyler independently. Our family dynamic remained complicated, but there was a new foundation of honesty that had never existed before. I continued to build my own life in Boston, finding that the resolution with my family imperfect, as it was freed emotional energy I had not realized I was still expending. My startup expanded to more schools, and I received recognition from the tech community for our impact on educational access. I also found myself more open to personal connections. Through a coding mentor program I ran, I met Sarah, a high school computer science teacher with a passion for educational equity. Unlike previous relationships, I found myself able to be vulnerable about my past without fear of judgment. Sarah's own complicated family history gave her insight into my experiences, and her warmth and emotional intelligence complemented my more analytical nature. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth was not defined by my family's recognition or lack thereof. The lesson I had given my family was ultimately one I needed to fully embrace myself: that true family is built on respect, genuine interest, and unconditional love, not obligation or blood ties. On a crisp fall evening almost 2 years after that fateful family dinner in Minneapolis, I hosted my first Thanksgiving in my Boston home. My father came, as did Amanda and Tyler. My mother begged off with health concerns, perhaps not ready for the role reversal of being a guest at her son's table. Jason had a prior commitment, but sent a surprisingly thoughtful message. Around my table were also the people who had become my chosen family, colleagues who had become friends, mentors who had become confidants, and Sarah, who had become the partner I never thought I would find. As I looked around at this blend of biological and chosen family, I realized that standing firm in my worth had not only taught my family a necessary lesson, but had opened the door to authentic relationships I might never have developed had I simply played the role of financial savior without addressing the deeper issues. The healing was not complete and perhaps never would be entirely, but I had found peace in the knowledge that I had acted with integrity, offering help that fostered growth rather than enabling old patterns. In doing so, I had also freed myself from the need for validation I had carried since childhood. What do you think about setting boundaries with family? Have you ever had to stand up to relatives who only reached out when they needed something? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about setting healthy boundaries and finding self-worth. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and others, is having the courage to say no to harmful patterns and yes to genuine growth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to value yourself even when others do not.